Bills Mafia. On tonight's Air Raid Hour, we'll be breaking down the Bills schedule and making our record predictions for 2023. We will also predict the winners of each division, the wildcard teams, and we will make our Super Bowl picks. But first,
welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. And Dave, we are 1 week away from Buffalo Bills, New York Jets, Monday Night Football in the Meadowlands. We are only 4 days away from NFL football, and we get an entire Sunday to ourselves to just enjoy with the week one slate of games. How pumped are you for the week ahead in terms of professional football as we got our taste of college this weekend?
Well, it is nice the week is finally here. That sort of week between the final preseason game and the start of the regular season seems to take forever. We'll get a taste of a really kind of a nice opening game here on Thursday between the Lions and Chiefs. Kind of an exciting interconference type of game. A lot of people are high on the Lions this year. Obviously, the Chiefs coming back as Super Bowl champs. So, obviously, a lot of the people in our chat, if not all of them in the chat tonight, will be rooting for the Lions in that game. But a great way to start off the season. And then Sunday, do a little scouting, right? You got the whole day. The Bills don't play till Monday. You can kind of sit back and watch the games and then really kind of have Monday to get yourself mentally ready for that Bills game. So kind of an interesting start to the season for the Bills. They've really been opening really at 1:00 on Sunday for the last several years to open the season. Obviously, we had the Rams Bills game last year, but for the most part, it's been 1 p.m. So I'm excited. This is one of my favorite shows we do all year, the prediction show. And 1 week away from today at this time, we will be in the midst of that first game.
And you just said it. Today is going to be our annual NFL prediction show. So we're not just going to talk about the Bills, even though we're still going to be heavy on the Bills, especially early in the show. But we're going to be making our predictions for the entire season, who we think are going to win all the different divisions of the National Football League, who we think the wild card teams are. And then we're obviously going to make our Super Bowl predictions as well. So as we go along tonight, you guys in the comments section, share who you think your surprise teams are going to be this year, who you think the division winners are going to be this year, your Super Bowl predictions, your wild card predictions. Play along with us at home in the comment section. We'll put some of your answers up on the screen. And our weekly challenge for you, once this video is over and the show is no longer live, so whether you watch the show with us live or you're listening or watching on demand, comment on this video with your Bills 2023 prediction. What's your record prediction? How do you forecast the Bills in the playoffs? If you see the Bills making the playoffs, which I think, and I hope most of Bills Mafia does. And we're going to get into that in just one moment because, Dave, I look at the 2023 schedule and I'm not going to lie to you. As a fan, I get nervous. I'm looking at this schedule. I did a solo pod about a month and a half ago where I sort of broke down our opponents this year. And there's a lot of 50-50 games on this Buffalo Bills schedule, especially late in the season. I don't want to say the Buffalo Bills should ever be considered underdogs because the most the team will ever be favored against the Bills is going to be like 3 points. It'll be a small margin of error, I think. But I broke the schedule down into 4 brackets. And I looked at it and I said, I think we have 3 70-30 games this season. The Commanders, the Raiders, and the Bucks. Those are teams that the Bills should be heavily favored in those games. I looked at 3 games that should be 60-40 games, and that's the Patriots, who, no offense, I mean, we see it. We've been having this conversation on social media the last couple of days. There's just a lack of high-end talent on that roster. And the Broncos, who are in year 1 with Sean Payton. Then there were some 55-45 games where the Bills are going to be favored, but these games are going to be tight. The Chargers, the Cowboys, the Jaguars, the Giants, and the Dolphins and the Jets, when we play them in their respective homes, And then the 50-50 games, most of which come late in the season. Chiefs, Bengals, Eagles, Dolphins, and Jets on the road. Those are the 50-50 games. What are your thoughts on the Buffalo Bills schedule? Would you rank any team differently in terms of how the Bills stack up against their opponents?
No, I think you're dead on. The way I kind of broke it down was into, I would say I broke mine into three categories, right? And
Mhm.
I did it based on sort of what I thought was, I guess it's somewhat based on odds, but I basically had should wins, good chance at wins, and toss ups, right? And
Mhm.
so those were kind of um the three buckets I had. And as I was kind of breaking that down based on opponent, what I really came to see, and as we've talked about many times on this show, is starting with week 9, going into the, basically the second half of the schedule, it is really, like, at least right now, look.
Murderer's row of quarterbacks that we have to face.
And it's kind of the opposite of last year's schedule,
Mhm.
right? Like last year, we felt we had that really tough stretch early in the season, and obviously came out of that bye and played Green Bay. But going into that, we had played the Chiefs. We had some tough games before that. Now we have the late bye, right? Week 13 this year, but the second half of the schedule is lined up in every one of my games that I classified as a toss up is in the from week 9 on, right?
Mhm.
And all of the games, well, I should say, 4 of the 6 games I put as should wins are in the first half
Mhm.
of the schedule. So to me, this schedule breaks down, and as I'm looking at it holistically, I think the Bills really need to get off to a good start this season. They need to pad that record with wins early on, in the chance that they get into some of these tough games late in the season. And I'm not saying they're going to lose them all, right? They're toss-up games. They're not.
Mhm.
I'm not saying they're going to lose them all. I'm not saying they're going to win them all, but there's a good chance that they don't win all of those games, or they split some of those games. So you're going to want to pad the early season part of the schedule with some wins. And yeah, there's some tough games down the stretch, as you mentioned, with the quarterbacks we play.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it and I feel like heading into that Bengals game in week 9, the Buffalo Bills gotta have, like, 7 or 8 wins of their first 8 games, right? Like, they gotta be 8-0 or 7-1 heading into that Bengals game, because after the Bengals game, you get a reprieve with the Broncos, and I don't wanna take the Broncos lightly, but it's a little bit of a reprieve compared to the next opponents. You got the Jets, then you got the Eagles, then a bye week, and then the Chiefs and the Cowboys and the Chargers. That is a murderer's row of elite quarterback play, of veteran quarterback play, of some really good defenses. So the Buffalo
Mhm.
Bills, as Charles G mentioned, like they have to get out to a hot start this year.
They
That was
do.
in my notes. Need to have
They do.
a fast start. And the other thing that I stated was they need to beat the mediocre and unproven quarterbacks on their schedule this year. We can't afford to lose to Jimmy G. We can't afford to lose. No offense to Sam Howell, because I love Sam Howell. It's going to be his third career start when we play him. Can't lose to Sam
Mhm.
Howell. Can't lose to
Cannot.
Mac Jones twice. Can't lose to Baker. Can't lose to Russell Wilson after the performance he put on last year, even if he improves this year. We cannot lose to mediocre and unproven quarterbacks this year. Dropping even one significantly affects our chance to do what we want to do this season.
Yeah, and that's where it comes down to, like, if the Bills do drop one of those games, the way you have to look at it is then they have to make sure that they win a
Mhm.
game against the likes of the Chiefs, the Chargers, whatever, and you might have to then win more, or one more than you really needed to or wanted to, against some of those really tough teams. Because like you said, it's at Chiefs, sandwich the bye, and then and at Philadelphia. I mean, in that stretch, I mean, I think I have it reversed actually. I
Mhm.
think it's at Philadelphia, then the bye, then at the Chiefs, but still, tough stretch there, right? And
Yeah.
then after that, it's Dak and Justin Herbert. So, um, to me, that's the critical stretch of the Bills season. If they can go into those games and not have, I'll call it, a ton of pressure on them, right? If they can go into those games feeling like they can split, let's say out of those
Mhm.
that game stretch, and they can split, I think that's as good as you can hope for. But it is important that like you said, you got to be like 8-1, 7-2.
Mhm.
You gotta have it sort of ready to go, um, as you head into that Cincinnati game.
Yeah. Roy Collins comes in and says, and all those teams have to play Josh Allen, and that's 100% correct. So, as much as like me and you as fans look at the schedule and like, man, that's brutal. Guess what? The fans of the Cowboys, the Eagles, the Bengals, they look at this as a tough opponent that they have to go up against, an elite quarterback that they have to go up against as well. And then John Herring with a great comment when Von Miller does come back. Yeah, we're definitely going to need him, starting with the Bengals, and then we play the Eagles, and we got the Jets, and we have Mahomes, and we have all those teams that we have to play. Dak. That's when Von Miller should be back, and that's when we're going to need him to dominate and be that closer. We spent all last offseason talking about Von Miller. He was brought in to be the closer. We saw it in that Kansas City game. He was in there on the pressure that led to the interception to end the Chiefs game, but then he got hurt towards the end of the season. We didn't have that closer the back half of the season. We didn't have that pass rush the back half of the season. So that's a great point from John as well. I looked at the schedule and I think that we need to go at least 4-2 in the division. I respect the Jets and I respect the Dolphins and I respect the moves that they made this offseason. As loud and as arrogant and as cocky as their fans are, I think a little too loud, I think a little too arrogant, I think a little too cocky. They do have good football teams. I'm not going to disrespect what they did and what they look like on paper. But we got to sweep the Pats and we got to split the Jets and the Dolphins. I think we have to go at least 4-2 in the division. I think we need to beat the Raiders. We need to beat the Commanders. We need to beat the Bucs. We need to beat the Broncos. No offense to those teams and those fan bases. The Bills will be favored in those games. The Bills should win those games. That's 8 wins. And then you need at least 5 more from there to get to, or excuse me, you need at least 4 more from there to get to 12 wins. I'm not a greedy guy. I don't need 14, 15 wins from this football team. If they do, to me, that's gravy. The number I'm looking at is 12. I will feel really, really comfortable if the Buffalo Bills can get to 12 wins. I think that will at least ensure you a place in the playoffs and a chance to ultimately do what you want to do and win the Super Bowl. I don't know with how tough our schedule is. A number 1 seed is in the cards this year, but who knows? Again, everything after that 12th win is gravy. The Buffalo Bills overperformed how I thought they would last year as well. Those last games, Chargers, Chiefs, Bengals, Eagles, Chargers, Cowboys, Jags, Giants, just get 4 wins in those 7 games and it gets you to that 12-point marker. And I think this exercise really illustrates just how tough our 2023 schedule is.
Schedule's tough. I approached it not necessarily individual games. I approached it more, I think there's a chance that the NFL schedule is weird, right? You'll end up maybe losing a game that you don't expect to lose, and you may end up winning a game that you don't expect to win. So in my mind, I'm very close to you, though I will have to say I agree with Spin's comment here. 11 wins gets you in the playoffs, possibly 10. And my prediction right now for the Bills, as it stands, is 11-6. And some people are not going to like that from me. I do think it's a tough schedule. I do think there's at least a decent chance in some of these should win games against like the likes of Jacksonville, Denver, Giants, that maybe the Bills, maybe don't come out winning all of those games, right? And I do think that really the 3 that you absolutely must win are the 3 you mentioned early in the season: Vegas, Washington, and Tampa Bay. Outside of that, I can't really say that it's like I'm going to call it a must win on the rest of the schedule, because I do generally respect like pretty much all the rest of the schedule. Not that I disrespect those other 3 teams, but if you're the Bills, you cannot lose to the Raiders, Commanders, or Tampa Bay. So I'm going with 11-6. I do think that gets the Bills the division. I think Miami and the Jets will be nipping on their heels at that record, but I do think 11-6 gets the Bills the division, especially as you said, if they do go 4-2 in the division, or possibly, and possibly split with the Jets and Dolphins. I do think a 4-2 divisional mark is good, and I think it will win you the division. I don't think the Bills will be the 1 seed. I still have the Chiefs as the 1 seed in the AFC this year, but I do think the Bills can be right about where they were last year in that 3 seed range. So I like them at 11-6. That's my prediction.
All right. So Kaz Scott comes in at 13-4. Spin 0481 comes in and says, our schedule is always harder than it really is. I got him going 13-4, 12-5 at worst. Walter S. laying down the gauntlet. He says, I'm over the regular season. I'm judging them on the playoffs. And that was sort of the point of this exercise. We got to get to the playoffs before we can be judged on our playoff performance. So you got 11-6. I have 12-5 for the Buffalo Bills. We're going to see if that is good enough for the Buffalo Bills to win the AFC East in our minds in a moment. But before we get to that and our full divisional predictions, a word from our guys over at Cover One Buffalo.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
All right. Thank you over to the guys over there at Cover One Buffalo. And again, the number one way you can support us, head on over to cover1.football and join up for that Cover One Pass subscription. All right, Dave, I've got 12-5, and I also believe that 12-5 will in fact be good enough for the Buffalo Bills to win the AFC East this year. Who is your prediction to win the AFC East?
And I think 11-6 is good enough to win the AFC East. As I just mentioned in the last segment, I do think that all of these teams at AFC East, if you look at their schedules, they're brutal. The Bills do have a tough schedule, as we just mentioned, but so do the Dolphins, Jets, and Patriots, right? They all have tough divisions. You look at the Jets, right? They have a maybe slightly easier road where they get to play Atlanta and Houston, whereas obviously the Bills don't have that. But I think Miami has a very tough schedule, kind of like a mirror image of the Bills' schedule as well. And for that reason, I think that the overall division will be competitive, but I just don't know that the total wins are going to be there overall for the division. And that's why I feel like 11-6, if you're the Bills, does still win you that division.
All right. And for the folks at home, again, we're about to get into who we think are going to win all the divisions across the National Football League. So play along with us at home. Send us your picks in the comment section, and we'll put your stuff up on the screen, and we'll sort of critique and analyze what you guys have to say as well and get your voice heard as well. And we're going to move on now to the NFC East. The defending Super Bowl runner-ups in Jalen Hurts and the Eagles obviously are atop that division. They do have two new coordinators this year. You've got Dak Prescott, Micah Parsons, and the Dallas Cowboys, with Mike McCarthy assuming offensive play calling duties this year in Dallas. You got Brian Dable, Saquon Barkley, the addition of Darren Waller, Wink Martindale, and that tenacious defensive line there in New York. They're coming off a wild card playoff game last year. And you have the Washington Commanders, led by the definition of mediocre in Ron Rivera, but they got a fun young quarterback in Sam Howell and a new offensive coordinator in Eric Bieniemy. So what is your prediction for the NFC East?
I still think it's the Eagles. I still think they have the best roster in the division. I know they lost some linebackers, and I know that there's been some chatter around the new coordinators, and I know you're going to talk about that. However, and personally, I don't really like Sirianni that much, but I still think they have the best roster. They have a legitimate MVP candidate in Jalen Hurts. I think they do have the best quarterback in the division and maybe the best quarterback in the NFC, which still helps them a ton. And I do think that with that offensive line that they still have intact, and really defensive line that they still have intact, the Eagles have really built from the inside out. Obviously, we will see what it means with the addition of DeAndre Swift to the backfield. They've really remodeled their entire backfield. Miles Sanders is gone to Carolina. They now have Rashad Penny, DeAndre Swift to add to Kenneth Gainwell, who's had a good camp, and they still have that great offensive line. Looks like another season of success on tap as well for the likes of A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and Dallas Goedert. So for me, I've still got the Eagles coming out of the NFC East.
Yeah, you almost talked me into it there with yours, but I'm actually going to go with the Dallas Cowboys. It pains me to do this because I've never been a real big Mike McCarthy believer, but They got Dak Prescott distributing the ball. They're going to lean on Tony Pollard this year with Zeke Elliott gone. CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, Michael Gallup. They got Jake Ferguson, who I really liked in the draft last year, to go along with Luke Schoonmaker. So they got plenty of people to distribute the ball to, a solid offensive line. And then you have a Dan Quinn-led defense with Micah Parsons. They added Mozzie Smith in the middle of said defense. They add Stephon Gilmore at cornerback to go along with Trayvon Diggs. So I got a lot of flack this offseason whenever I would tweet that, like, I think Bills Cowboys is a 50-50 game or a 55-45 game. Like, I got a lot of flack for that. I think the Cowboys, as much as it pains me to say, I think they're a better team than people think. And John Herring comes in and says they don't impress them. Like, that's literally what 95% of the people respond to when I say this, but it's just a gut feeling that I have this year. So I'm going to go with the Dallas Cowboys winning the NFC East. But Billy Williams comes in, says the Commanders. Jessica Tennis comes in, says Philly just has too much talent. Pops Mafia says the Eagles as well. So it'll be really interesting to see who wins the NFC East. And Bob R comes in late and says Eagles schedule is brutal as well. They play Dallas, Kansas City, Buffalo, San Francisco, then Seattle all in a row, and Dallas. 10 for the Bills because they usually have a midseason slide. So he thinks the Bills are going to win 10 games, and he thinks the Eagles have a brutal schedule as well. So moving on now to the AFC North. This is, I think, what might be, I don't want to say, this might be the best top to bottom division in the National Football League. You have Joe Burrow and the Bengals. They're working in a new left tackle in Orlando Brown Jr. They're also working in 2 new safeties on defense. They're lucky enough to be like one of the few good teams that gets to retain their coordinators. So that's good for Zach Taylor. Kenny Pickett and the new look Steelers, they had a really, really impressive preseason, like probably looked the best of any team in the National Football League in the preseason, whatever that is worth. Lamar Jackson, the new look Ravens offense with Tom Mocking calling plays, Zay Flowers, Odell Beckham Jr. And then the Cleveland Browns, they get a full year of Deshaun Watson and they get some new toys on defense as well. So what is your prediction for the AFC North?
And I would have to say I agree as far as like the top to bottom quality, right? You might not have the upper tier, like the Bengals are in that upper tier, but like you don't necessarily have 2 teams in that upper tier, but really top to bottom, this division is going to be a dogfight all year. And I think this is why the Bills are still in a decent position to, get a 2 or a 3 seed, because this division is going to beat up on each other all year. I still think I'm going with the Bengals here to come out of this division. I stand by that they have the best skill position group maybe in the NFL. They've added Irv Smith, who's maybe a post-hype breakout type of guy this year. Joe Burrow has liked to feature the tight end in the red zone as well. We know that they have still Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, still have Joe Mixon running the ball and have an interesting group of running backs behind him now with Trayvon Williams and Chris Evans. So we'll see what happens there. They have 2 division games to start the year, but then a fairly decent stretch after that, getting to play the Rams, at Titans, at Arizona. They get to play the AFC South this year. The AFC North gets to play the AFC South this year, which I think is an advantage over a team like the Bills, who has to play maybe a tougher schedule. So give me the Bengals coming out of the AFC North.
We got a bunch of people coming in here. Steve Noble saying, I'm picking the Steelers. I think they're a surprise team. Pops Mafia coming in says the Bengals are elite compared to the other teams just being really good. Jessica Tennis says, I think that's fair as well. Baltimore, the Bengals, the Steelers, and the Browns, the top 4 teams separated by 4 games, 11-6 wins it. So she thinks it'll be tight there as well. Walter S coming in says Ravens. If Lamar doesn't get hurt, the Ravens probably sweep the Bengals last year. The Bengals were just as close to losing their playoff game as us against a backup quarterback. Pops Mafia says if Joe Burrow is fully healthy, obviously got to have that caveat there because their backup quarterback is Jake Browning. I think that might be.
It's kind of all the teams, right?
I'd take Kyle Allen over Jake Browning. So as bad as we got a backup quarterback, I think the Bengals have it worse. So it'll be interesting. I'm actually going with Steve Noble here, and I'm going with an upset selection. I'm taking the Pittsburgh Steelers, and there's a number of reasons why I'm doing this. Joe Burrow missed the entire preseason. I think that the Bengals are going to come out a little rusty because of that. They are working in 2 new safeties, and I think that as a defense, they're going to struggle without Jesse Bates and Von Bell for a while. I know that they replaced him with Nick Scott and Dax Hill. I get that, but I think it'll take a while to adjust. And I don't think Orlando Brown Jr. is as good as Bengals fans probably want him to be. Kansas City fans really didn't miss him all that much. A lot of times his success is scheme success. Chiefs get the ball out a lot. The Bengals do as well. Don't get me wrong. So he might do well there, but no matter how many pieces they seem to add to that offensive line, the offensive line still continues to kind of like Buffalo be mediocre at best. So I'm going to go with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm not discounting the Cincinnati Bengals. They're going to be one of my wild card picks, but I think that they're going to get off to a slow start, and it's going to be enough for the Pittsburgh Steelers, who had a really aggressive preseason. They've got a really aggressive defense. They've got enough offensive playmakers in my mind to overcome the fact that Matt Canada is the one calling plays on that offense. And anyone who's listened to this show or seen me on social media knows I think Matt Canada is an absolute joke. I think it's going to be a battle of attrition in the AFC North, and I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to come out on top. All right, so on to the NFC North. You got the defending NFC North champions and the Minnesota Vikings, who brought in Brian Flores to try and, play some defense there in Minnesota. That might help their chances this season. You got Jordan Love ushering in a new era with the Green Bay Packers. You've got everybody's favorites in the 2023 season in the Detroit Lions. And then you got the Chicago Bears, Justin Fields. He got some nice free agent pickups around him. And on that defense, they got a nice little makeover, including DJ Moore, by trading that number 1 overall pick. So could the Chicago Bears make a play in the NFC North? What is your prediction on who wins the NFC North?
Going to be a really interesting division this year. Obviously, the Vikings won last year, but I mean, for the better part of the last, decade plus to almost 2 decades, it's been Aaron Rodgers' division. And everyone else kind of fighting for scraps behind it. This year, very much more wide open. I do think that there's a lot of interesting storylines in this division. Obviously, the Lions were the darlings of last offseason, being on Hard Knocks, and there's an expected jump coming from them this year with the excitement building around that team. The Jordan Love era begins in Green Bay, which I think is going to kind of put them at the bottom of the division this year. And the Bears with Justin Fields, a lot of people think that he could be a potential dark horse MVP candidate this year with the addition of DJ Moore and the likes of that team potentially competing for the division. But for me, it's the Vikings still. You have what I believe will be the offensive player of the year in Justin Jefferson. You added Jordan Addison in the draft. I don't think you are losing much with the Adam Thielen departure to Carolina. You got Alexander Madison taking over the backfield this year, Ty Chandler there as well. I think Madison ready to take over. And the Vikings, the question for them will end up inevitably being how that defense can hold up. But Kirk Cousins right now, I mean, he's proven more, and I don't think that he's a higher ceiling than Justin Fields by any means, but I think he's the most proven quarterback in that division. I don't think that's an unfair statement to say. So I'll give the Vikings with maybe the best offensive player in the NFL, and a solid team coming back with under O'Connell, who I really like as a head coach. I'll give the Vikings the division.
I like your pick. It's not going to be my pick when I reveal my pick, but I think you mentioned 2 names there in Alexander Madison and you mentioned Jordan Addison. Those are the 2 names that are getting all the talk. But another guy that you mentioned, Ty Chandler, and their slot receiver, former UB Bull, Miami Hurricane, KJ Osborne. I think if the Vikings win it this year, win the division this year, it's going to be Brian Flores resurrecting that defense. It's going to be the emergence, not of Addison, but of KJ Osborne as a legitimate threat as a receiver. And I wouldn't be surprised if Ty Chandler is a starting running back by the end of the season over Alexander Madison. Me and you were both big believers. I believe he was your no matter what running back of the draft last season, 2 years ago. So we are both big believers in Ty Chandler. To go along with that, TJ Hawkinson got paid. I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about him as second or third best tight end in the league by the time the season is over. Kirk Cousins, I think, is the kind of quarterback who couldn't pepper a guy like TJ Hawkinson with targets over a full season, having the full offseason to work with him. A bunch of people coming in. Walter S. comes in and says the Vikings. Jessica Dennis says the Lions, the Vikings, the Packers, the same old Bears. We've got Anyone else come in with a prediction? RJ Melville says, I actually think the Vikings are tanking. They knew they were the 27th best team last year. So it should be interesting. My prediction is the Detroit Lions. I really do believe Ben Johnson is probably the best non-Andy Reid play caller in the NFL. I remember when he took over the play calling 2 seasons ago, they weren't a very good team. They were running all these like really creative and innovative trick plays. They had nothing to lose. They were winning games. And then Dan Campbell's like, yeah, I don't know if I want to make him the play caller. And they went like all of training camp not naming a play caller. And I watched Hard Knocks, and you have Deuce Staley and Aaron Glenn just like yapping back and forth at each other. And they didn't even really highlight Ben Johnson at all, even though I think that he's really the brains of the operation there. And it proved to be true that he was the brains of the operation there in Detroit. I really do think he's the best non-Andy Reid play caller in the NFL. They add Jahmyr Gibbs. They're going to get Jameson Williams for a full season once he gets off that suspension. The defense should be better with some new pieces like Jack Campbell. I think that they're the best of a questionable bunch. There's questions around Jordan Love and whether he can do it. There's questions around the Chicago Bears and whether they've added enough around Justin Fields to be competitive in 2023. And then there's questions around the Minnesota Vikings as well. Was last season a fluke because all the analytics would suggest that they were not as good of a football team as they were and as they ended up last season. So I'm going to go with the Detroit Lions here. And there was a good question in the comment section before we move on. Do you think the Detroit Lions can pull the upset week 1 Thursday night against the Kansas City Chiefs? Dave, what do you think? Can the Lions pull an upset?
Yeah, wasn't it Jared Goff at the helm when the Chiefs and Rams had that epic sort of shootout to start the
56 to 53 game? Yeah.
I think the Chiefs won that game, but I mean, Jared Goff at the helm there. Look,
people forget that Jared Goff was good, and like I think he might be good again. Like they're talking extension in Detroit. They're talking extension.
I just think it's a no lose spot for the Lions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because Dan Campbell is going to play up that underdog mentality going into that game. No one's going to give the Lions much of a chance. The Lions, as you mentioned, the best of an unknown or the best of the question marks, and like that could play to their advantage in a week 1 game where no one really knows what the Lions are going to be this year. Are they going to take that step? Are they going to kind of remain what they were? And so I think that's an advantage for the Lions going into week 1, being a bit of an unknown. And as Steve says, Chris Jones holding out, it'll be interesting. I think the Lions do have a chance. I still probably won't put money on the Lions to win outright, but I do think they probably have more of a chance than people are giving them right now.
Yeah, nothing to lose, which is where Dan Campbell is at his best. That's where the Lions really started to show progress 2 seasons ago, late in the season. They have one of the best offensive lines in the league, and again, like, is Jared Goff back? Jared Goff is back. He ended up in the perfect situation in Detroit because I think Jared Goff, in order for him to be a good quarterback, he needs to have elite protection. And that's what he has in Detroit. Jared Goff wouldn't survive with a team with like a mediocre offensive line. Like even a top like 10 to 15 offensive line probably wouldn't be great for Jared Goff. He legitimately, I think, needs the offensive line that he has in Detroit. So their back's against the wall. No Chris Jones. They're probably going to pull out and roll out some trick plays, and they're going to be creative. Like I wouldn't be surprised if you see an onside kick or, those running back tosses or whatever it is, the trick plays that Dan Campbell wants to come up with. The Detroit Lions are going to go out there and they're going to go balls to the walls in this game. And I think there's a really good chance week 1 that they could upset the Kansas City Chiefs. All right, on to now the AFC and the NFC South. Gee, I wish the Buffalo Bills were in the AFC South. That would be nice. Obviously, they have a pretty decent team at the top. Last year's division winners, the Jacksonville Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence. You have Trayvon Walker heading into year 2. Maybe he pops a little bit more as a pass rusher. You've added Calvin Ridley to that wide receiving core. Everyone is really, their money is on the Jaguars right now. Tennessee has just the strangest football team in the National Football League outside of maybe the Patriots. They add D-Hop, but they lose a ton of talent. You thought they were tanking, but then they kept Tannehill and they kept King Henry, and it's just a weird situation there in Tennessee. Indy's going to be trotting out a first-round project quarterback in Anthony Richardson.
They're Jonathan Taylor the first 4 weeks.
Jonathan Taylor. So they're going to be taking their lumps, I think, early on, even though I think Anthony Richardson has a chance to be really good. And then Houston, led by D'Amico Ryans, they're starting their rebuild with CJ Stroud and Will Anderson, but they might just not have the talent to hang around for very long. It's going to be more of a season of just developing players there in Houston, possibly, but I could be wrong. What is your prediction for the AFC South?
Yeah, and assessing everyone's schedule and assessing really the schedule within. I mean, you want to play the AFC South this year. It looks like if you can, right? I think the Jags are the class of this division, which is crazy to say that after a couple, after the years they've been through. But really, man, what a difference the right head coach makes going from the Urban Meyer era to the Doug Peterson era. Really, Doug Peterson. Was his time shortened too early in Philadelphia? I don't know, right? But he's obviously the right man right now for this Jaguars team who's up and coming. And Trevor Lawrence looks to be the real deal. I love their offense, what they've got. Also, don't forget, they added Tank Bigsby as well to the backfield to pair with Travis Etienne. You mentioned Calvin Ridley coming back this year. The Jags have some really interesting pieces on defense as well. I do think that the Jags will win this division. I do think Tennessee's a weird team. Like, I feel like they're really probably the only team that could maybe threaten Jacksonville because they tend to have some of these. Yeah, you're right. They're just so hard to figure out. If they ride King Henry again all year and like they can figure something out and they can
Tajay Spears pretty good too.
Tajay Spears is good. What's going to happen with D-Hop? It doesn't really seem like a great fit on paper. Like, I don't really understand Tennessee's vision. I've mentioned this before. You trade away AJ Brown, you draft Treylon Burks. Now you bring in DeAndre Hop. Like why didn't you just pay AJ Brown? Like I don't understand. So
that offense too. It's like Hopkins, it's Treylon Burks, it's Kyle Phillips. Who's stretching the field? Like, they don't have any speed at the wide receiver position.
I mean, I agree with Jessica. They are well coached, but I don't think it's going to be enough for them to topple the Jags. Houston, I think it will be interesting. I don't think they're really any threat to win the division, but I hope to kind of see them be a little bit more competitive this year. And the Colts, I just don't know what they're doing, right? Like you come out, if you're Chris Ballard and you say, well, we only won 4 games last year, trying to blame that as the reason why you're not paying Jonathan Taylor. Like, it was his fault that they only won 4 games. I mean, give me a break, dude.
Some of the commentary is from Ballard and Jim Irsay has been disgusting. Like, it's been gross. I like Ballard, but
and the thing is, the Colts have some decent players too, right? Like, they have a good offensive line. They drafted Josh Downs. They have Alec Pierce, Michael Pittman. They could have had Jonathan Taylor back there helping out Anthony Richardson. Like, if Jonathan Taylor was there for the first 4 games, like, I might have given the Colts a dark horse chance to kind of come out and maybe make some hay. But no, I think one team comes out of this division. I think it's the Jags.
Yeah, we got Spin 0481 coming in saying the Jags, the only team that makes the playoffs. Yep. Steve Noble says Jacksonville is clearly division winner. Jessica Nez says the Titans are going to surprise. The Jags are too arrogant and lose games they shouldn't. I'll tell you what, it's going to be very dependent on their rookie left tackle out of Oklahoma too, with Robinson suspended, Harrison over there at left tackle. So their offensive line is still kind of a question mark in Jacksonville as well, and their defense really hasn't proven all that much either. So I do think teams are crowning Jacksonville a little too early. But at the same time, there's really no alternative unless, like Jessica says, like, you really think the Titans are going to make it interesting here. And Renaissance Man comes in and says the Titans are definitely a very weird team. They're the type of team to start off 3-6 and then sort of make a run late. I don't disagree with that, because as much as, like, my pick is going to be the Jaguars, high-powered offense, defense should be better. But I think it's mostly just the rest of the division around them is just not great. Like, that's the only reason. I'm not puffing my chest out about the Jacksonville Jaguars like some people are. And I know Monkey Business comes in here and says Trevor Lawrence is going to be the 2023 NFL MVP. He might be, because it's a very high-octane offense with Tank and with ATN and the receivers they got. But the offensive line is a question. The defense is a question. So it'll be interesting to see how that lands. And sorry, you had Jacksonville too, right? I was reading the comments. I got a little distracted. All right. So we both have the Jacksonville Jaguars. So on to the NFC South, and both the AFC South and the NFC South were both sort of black eyes on the league last year. They both were literally like came down to the wire. No team really deserved to make the playoffs. The Jaguars saved it late with that comeback win over the Chargers in the wild card round. But in the NFC South, you had the defending champion Bucks, who trade in Tom Brady for Baker Mayfield, and they had to shut off a lot of pieces because of salary cap reasons, but they still got a lot of big names on that roster. The Falcons, they've added Bijan to go sort of more positionless on offense with guys like Kyle Pitts and Cordarrelle Patterson. I still think they're lacking depth at the skill positions there, and their defense is, I don't know.
Who's their number
they
two?
added,
Mac Hollins? Is he their wide receiver too? Mac Hollins?
Well, they got Drake London, they got Mac Hollins, they got Scotty Miller. Like it's not too deep there in Atlanta. They added a lot on defense, including Jesse Bates. They added mostly on defense until they got to the draft. The Saints, they've added Derek Carr to a pretty decent all-around roster. They just refuse to give up. They refuse to hit the reset. They refuse to rebuild there in New Orleans. They just keep kicking the can down and down and down and down the road. And then you have the Panthers, and they have Bryce Young, some exciting skill guys. They got a really solid defense, even though Brian Burns might not be playing. We don't know. That sort of popped up this morning. But that offensive line in the preseason looked really, really, really bad. And that's concerning if you're a Carolina Panthers fan. So what is your prediction? Who is your prediction to win the NFC South?
Yeah, I really wanted to pick Atlanta here, but I didn't. I went with the Saints. Just looking up and down the Saints roster, I think they have the best roster. I think they're decently deep. I think they made some really nice, smart signings in the offseason. Obviously, I think bringing Jamal Williams over to kind of carry the load while Alvin Kamara was a question mark as far as how many games he would end up being suspended. It turns out he's only going to be suspended 3 games. So you're going to have a trio of Jamal Williams, Kendra Miller, and Alvin Kamara at by week 4, which is a really nice trio in the backfield. You have reports, obviously, take this with a grain of salt because you had these reports last year that Michael Thomas looks better. Chris Olave is a rising star. I think Juwan Johnson's underrated as a tight end, and we know Derek Carr
Jimmy Graham,
loved slinging it to Darren Waller in Vegas. So I like Juwan Johnson maybe as like a for you fantasy people as like a late round guy if you're in a deep league. But for me, it's the Saints. I think Derek Carr is the best quarterback in that division. I think the Panthers are kind of like comparable to the Texans maybe this year, going to go through like that full reset, as you mentioned, with Bryce Young. And so Panthers are a ways away. I don't trust Tampa Bay with Baker Mayfield. They weren't even good last year with Tom Brady. So I don't trust them. And then the Falcons are really the only team that I think legitimately in my mind could compete with the Saints. I do like the Falcons pieces. It comes down to Desmond Ridder, right? And if you like Desmond Ridder or not. So for me, I'll take Derek Carr and that Saints roster to win the division this year.
Yeah, I'm going with the Saints as well. But before we get to that, Jessica Towns comes in and says Panthers, Saints, Falcons, and Bucks. Someone has to win with a losing record. Walter S. says it is the Saints division to lose. Steve Noble says he likes the Saints. Walter S. says Derek Carr, as you said, is the only true starting quarterback in that division.
Yeah,
I'll tell you what, because like legitimately, I'm rooting for Baker. I've always liked Baker compared to other people who don't like Baker so much. He's got Mike Evans. He's got Chris Godwin. I know he lost Russell Gage. That sucks. There's still some talent, even though they lost Ryan Jensen. That sucks on that offensive line.
Cade Otton breakout.
Yeah, Cade Otton, Rashad White, Sean Tucker had a huge preseason. He might be RB2 there. They still got some pieces on defense. New offensive coordinator coming over from Seattle. I wouldn't sleep on the Buccaneers. I wouldn't be surprised if the Buccaneers made a run. But at the end of the day, I'm not really going to buy them at this stage before the season even starts, before games are even played. Same with the Panthers and those offensive line issues. As much as I like Bryce Young, as much as I like the Panthers defense, the offensive line issues concern me. And then the Falcons, I don't believe in Desmond Ridder. I believe in Arthur Smith. I believe in his philosophy, his positionless skill position, offensive philosophy. I like it. It should be fun. It should be exciting. I'm not buying Desmond Ridder to execute it, though, and I still think they have their warts on defense. So I'm going to go with the New Orleans Saints. Their defense is going to be good like it always is under Dennis Allen. Their offense has weapons, as you mentioned, and they have pretty solid protection for Derek Carr, who I think will excel. The division is not great. They have to they're playing a rookie and Bryce Young 2 games a year. They're playing Desmond Ridder 2 games a year. They're playing Baker Mayfield 2 games a year. And Aramirov, my sports update on Twitter, went through and all the starting quarterbacks the Saints face this year. It's not exactly a gauntlet of quarterbacks that they're facing this year. The Saints and the Falcons are the 2 teams with the projected easiest schedule this year. I think the Saints are the better team to take advantage of it. So I'm going to go with the Saints as well. And Heather comes in, she can kind of agrees with me, right? Like Bucks surprise a little bit, and Jessica Tennis thinks the Carolina defense could win that division on their own, but is Brian Burns going to be a part of that defense? We don't know now. There's some intrigue. So many players now: Jonathan Taylor, Brian Burns, Chris Jones. A lot of players, more so than usual, since Le'Veon Bell missing games this year due to contract disputes. All right, that brings us now to the AFC and the NFC West. The AFC West, obviously Mahomes and the Chiefs, they start their title defense without Chris Jones. That'll be super interesting. You've got Herbert and the Chargers adding Kellen Moore to maybe spice up that offense a little bit. Sean Payton is looking to rebuild Russell Wilson out there in Denver. And Jimmy G takes his good looks to Vegas. That could be dangerous to try and salvage Josh McDaniels' career. He said he learned his lessons from his time in New England, but it appears through a couple of seasons that he has not learned anything from his time with the Denver Broncos. So what are your thoughts on the AFC West? Who do you have winning that division?
I mean, after what happened last year, obviously the Bills were the darlings of the offseason Super Bowl favorites. Not that people were writing off the Chiefs, but saying like, hey, no more Tyreek Hill. Like maybe they're going to take a step back. Like I'm not ever doing that again while they still have Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. So for me, it's Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, Chris Jones or not. That team is going to still be very good. Obviously, they're bringing back a lot of the same guys. They, expect to maybe have an increased role for Sky Moore this year with Juju now off to New England, but they still have Valdez-Scantling. They still have Travis Kelce. They have an interesting backfield with Pacheco and McKinnon back this year after they were a nice tandem last year. For me, it's still the Chiefs in that division until, as Jessica says, until further notice. The Chargers are going to be good, and we'll see that in my wild card picks. But I just, I think it's an interesting division. I think last year people were, a lot of people were kind of like maybe thinking Denver or the Chargers could challenge the Chiefs with Denver getting Russell Wilson. I do think Sean Payton is just smug enough to not give, Andy Reid, like not be intimidated by Andy Reid, which I think is a good thing. You need that in that division. And I don't think Josh McDaniels is intimidated by Andy Reid either, but I think his roster is just too bad to contend. So Sean Payton's an interesting name added to the division, non-player name added to the division. We'll see if he can do anything there. But Jerry Jeudy looks like he's going to miss some time. So we'll see the Chiefs division.
And Tim Patrick out too. Like it's
Marvin Mims time, baby.
and Cortland Sutton show. And Cortland Sutton does not look like he has the same pop since his multiple knee injuries. But Jessica Tennis comes in and says Chiefs, Chargers, Denver, and Raiders until further notice. Walter S says Denver. Russell Wilson had a full offseason to do more knee highs. Just kidding. Chiefs. Steve Noble says you almost have to pick the Chiefs, but he does believe the Broncos will be another surprise team. They had 6 one-score losses and couldn't score points in general. Peyton will help them with that a lot. And then Renaissance Man, I don't disagree that their wide receiver room is very underwhelming.
But we said that last year too, didn't we?
We said that last year too, and they made it work. And you know what? Justin Ross could be a dude for them. So it'll be really interesting to see. I have the Chiefs as well. I think the Chargers are going to give them a run for their money, but at the end of the day, their head coach is Brandon Staley with his questionable decision-making. The Chiefs' head coach is Andy Reid. Mahomes is Mahomes. Kelce is Kelce. Steve Spagnuolo, with or without Chris Jones, he could make a JV defense work in the National Football League. That's how good of a coach Steve Spagnuolo is. So I'm going to take the Chiefs here. And we're going to move on now to the NFC West. The 49ers, they double down on Brock Purdy. The Seahawks, they added firepower to both offense and defense with their draft capital and a little bit in free agency as well. They added DJ Jones on that defensive line. The Rams look to rebuild with a youth movement, and the Cardinals have their sights set on the number 1 overall pick in the 2024 draft. I promised my brother-in-law I would stop making fun of the Cardinals, so that's the only comment I will have on them this evening. Who is your prediction to win the NFC West?
Man, I did go with the 49ers, but I really wanted to pick the Seahawks. I really did. And I think it's just the 49ers. roster overall, their defense, the fact that they proved they could win with average to below average quarterback play. They have really good weapons on offense, in my opinion, with McCaffrey, Debo, Ayuk, Kittle, good offensive line, good defense, obviously. So Seattle will surprise, and I don't disagree with that. And they will be one of my wild card teams, just to give it away a little bit. And but I just couldn't quite pull the trigger on going with Seattle over the 49ers, though I do think it's a two-team race. I don't think really the Rams or the Cardinals obviously have that much of a shot. I don't think the Rams are necessarily going to, like, people are probably writing them off. I still don't think they're going to come back to even anywhere close to where they were 2 years ago when they were in that Super Bowl. I just think there's just too many question marks with that team. Offensive line, who's going to be there? Is Van Jefferson really going to be the number 2? Like, is Cam Akers really going to be the guy? Is Kyron Williams going to get more? Like, I just don't trust the Rams. So for me, I'll go with the Niners reluctantly, although I do like the Seahawks.
And we got Steve Noble coming in saying, I'm going with Seattle. They may have the best wide receiver group in the NFL. Jessica Tennis coming in and saying 49ers, too much talent, Seahawks, Rams, and then the man-child's team. I don't know. Is she referring to Jonathan Gannon there? I don't never heard him refer to as man-child before. I'm going with San Francisco as well. I mean, you have Christian McCaffrey, and then when he comes out, you have Elijah Mitchell. You got Debo Samuel, and then you have George Kittle. And I think Brandon Ayuk is ready to break out and become, like,
I think so too,
a top 15 NFL wide receiver.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's going to get the target share to be it, but I think he's going to look the part, if that makes sense. Like,
he did kind of look the part last year a little bit too.
Yeah. I mean, he's just ready to bust out. Former Sun Devil, so I got a soft spot for him as well. The Seahawks will challenge, but I think the experience of the 49ers will win out in the end. So I have the San Francisco 49ers taking that division. All right. Next up is going to be our wild cards. But first, this show is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza. 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're an out-of-towner like us, you can even get it mailed to your home. And I can tell you from experience, it's just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. All right, Dave, on to our wild card predictions now. My 3 AFC wild card teams are going to be the Chargers, the Bengals, and the Baltimore Ravens. That is right. I think the Miami Dolphins and the New York Jets, because of how difficult the AFC East is going to be, I think that they both get edged out. I mean, the AFC is just so damn good. I wish that there was like almost a panel of like a committee, like in college football, where every year you can realign the National Football League based on how rosters look, because sometimes it's a joke how much better one conference is than another. And there's peaks and valleys. Some years it's the NFC and some years it's the AFC. And sometimes there are teams that miss the playoffs in one conference that you think probably could have won the other conference outright and been the number 1 seed. Like, that's how disproportionate it is. And the NFC is very, very top heavy. The AFC East is just full of depth. And I really do feel bad leaving the Dolphins and Jets off of my list, because I'm not like a lot of Bills fans out there that want to just sort of rain on the parade of those two fan bases. I legitimately think that those are 2 really, really good football teams. I just think the way the schedule is created, I think only one AFC East team is going to make it. And obviously, as a Bills fan, I'm feeling like it's going to be the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, no, I get it. For me, this was really hard. I had the Chargers as the 5, the Steelers as the 6. Obviously, you had the Steelers win the division, so you had the Bengals in that spot. And then I had the Dolphins as a 7. I agree the schedule is tough. My last 2 teams out were the Ravens and Jets, and it was really hard for me to leave the Ravens out of the playoffs. But in a way, maybe I was just like mentally trying to jinx the Dolphins by putting them in the playoffs. And then at the end of the season, when they don't make it, I can be like, yes, I hex them somehow. But I just feel like their roster is really good. I think they have a better roster overall than the Ravens. I don't necessarily think they have a better coach, or really they don't have a better quarterback than the Ravens. I'll say that. But Tua with those weapons, and then who knows if something does materialize and they do add a Jonathan Taylor in a couple weeks' time through a trade and just couldn't get it done in time before the season. That roster is really good. They probably have, outside of the Bengals with Chase and Higgins, maybe even the best top 2 wide receivers in the NFL with Hill and Waddle. So I'll respect the Dolphins, put them in as a 7 seed, and then hope that I hex them and they don't make it.
Oh, yeah, Jessica Tennis coming in saying Bengals, Jags, and Steelers. Pops Mafia coming in saying Jets, Chargers, and Ravens. We got Steve Noble coming in saying Bengals, Ravens, and Chargers.
That's yours, right?
Yeah, that's that. That would be mine. A different order. I have Chargers, Bengals, and then Ravens, but very similar. And then Jessica Tennis gets to start off with the NFC wild card. She says Seahawks, Giants, and Vikings. Pops Mafia says Cowboys, Seahawks, and Vikings. A lot of familiar names cross between those 2 lists. My 3 wild card teams in the NFC were the Eagles, because remember I had the Cowboys win in the East, the Seahawks, and the Minnesota Vikings. I felt really, really bad leaving the New York Giants off my list. I just doubt that 3 teams from one division in the NFC can make it, unlike the AFC. So I think I'm going to pick 3 teams, all from different divisions: the Seahawks, the Eagles, and the Vikings. Who are your NFC wildcard teams?
Yeah, so my division winners again were the Eagles, Vikings, Saints, Niners. So my wild card teams are the Cowboys, Seahawks, and Lions. I think that for me, it was also hard to leave the Giants out. But again, kind of similar to the AFC East, that NFC East outside of maybe Washington is going to be beating up on each other all year. And I just couldn't leave the Lions out. I feel like they're ready to kind of make a jump into the playoffs. So my last 2 teams out were the Giants and Falcons. Those are my last 2 teams out. So yes, Cowboys as the 5, Seahawks as the 6, Lions as the 7 is how I had it in that order.
All right. Before we get to our Super Bowl predictions, Dave, who do you have as your 1 seeds? I have the Chiefs. I hate to say it. They're just a model of consistency. Every year people doubt them, and then every year they end up the 1 seed. So I'm not going to stray from that. Hopefully maybe I put a little jinx on them, like you try to put a jinx on the Dolphins. And I'm going to say the 49ers just because me and you were chatting before the show started about Warren Sharp analyzing the schedule based on Vegas odds this year. And the 49ers were the one really good team in the green of his chart, the green being the easiest schedules in the NFL. So the 49ers really luck out and have a rather easy schedule for as good of a roster as they have. So that might come back and bite them in the playoffs because they might not be as battle tested as some other teams, but I think it will earn them the 1 seed. Who are your 1 seeds this year?
I mean, I hate to chalk it up here, but I mean, my 1 seeds are going to be the Chiefs and the Eagles. I feel like the Chiefs, they're, we're going to try to hex them, right? And make them play on the road for once in the playoffs. And man, it's been such, I don't want to call it an easy road for them the last several years, but man, they've had all home games in the playoffs, right? So like make them go on the road somewhere, make their lives as difficult as possible. We know their team is super talented and we know they're going to be a threat even if they're playing on the road, but make it a little bit harder on them, right? So for that, I'm still picking them as the 1 seed. I think until someone knocks them off, they're the 1 seed. And then in the NFC, I'm going with the Eagles. I know they have a tough schedule. It's really brutal, but I just feel like the Vikings are a team that maybe, even though they might win that division, maybe won't win as many games just because it just doesn't seem like, I'm that confident in them. The Niners, I still worry about their quarterback situation over the course of the season, even though I do like their offensive weapons. And then obviously I don't think the NFC South is really a threat to maybe contrarian, right? Maybe the NFC South, because it's so bad, the Saints actually do have a chance to get the 1 seed, but no, I'll go with the Eagles.
All right, now it is time to make our Super Bowl predictions. The game this year will be played on Sunday, February 11th at Allegiant Field or Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, Nevada. My prediction for the Super Bowl this year, and it's a surprise outside of what everyone knows is coming from the AFC. I'm going Bills over the Seattle Seahawks. I'm always going to pick the Bills with Josh Allen as QB1. I'm going to manifest it into reality until it happens. But I do think that this football team this year is going to be battle tested heading into the playoffs, even though I don't think they're going to be the 1 seed because of how tough that schedule is. I think that the addition of Dalton Kincaid allows them to run more 12 personnel. They're stronger on the interior of the offensive line. The 12 personnel will help mask the tackles a little bit. They'll be able to work the middle of the football field more. I think Gabriel Davis is going to have a breakout year. James Cook is going to have a breakout year. I think this Buffalo Bills offense is going to be legitimate, and they're going to be battle tested, and they're going to put on a show in the playoffs. And then I think on the defensive side of the ball, they're going to get Von Miller back when it matters. They have Micah Hyde. They have Jordan Poyer back there roaming center field at safety, and they have Sean McDermott, who I think is going to be more aggressive on the defensive side of the ball, which might give the Buffalo Bills more turnovers and just a little bit more of an edge to this football team than we've had in years past on the defensive side of the ball. As for my Super Bowl losers, the Seahawks, I'm just really not that high on any one NFC team this season. So I'm going to go with a wild card pick. I think Geno has all that skill position talent in Walker and Charbonnet and Metcalf and Lockett and JSN and Noah Fant. He's got a really good offensive line in front of him if they can stay healthy. The defense, they were really bad in run support last year. They got some big time reinforcements in Draymond Jones, Jaron Reed, and they drafted your guy, Cameron Young, to that defensive line to help fix those issues. They got Boye Mafe, Derek Hall, and Wosu to rush the passer. So if those guys click, they could be deadly there as well. Bobby Wagner back in the middle of that defense, that veteran experience. They got 2 really good corners and the youngster Devin Witherspoon, a top 5 pick, Tariq Woolen, last year's standout player. And then they got Jamal Adams playing the star position. They've got Diggs, and they've got now Julian Love at safety as well. So I think that team is just, I think on paper they have a really, really solid roster, but I think that they might be able to go on a run in the postseason against what I think is a weaker NFC this year and maybe surprise some people and get to Vegas. What is your Super Bowl prediction?
And I like your pick, by the way, before I get to mine, because I look at the coaches as well, the head coaches across the landscape of the NFC. And even we talk a lot about the quarterbacks being way better in the AFC than the NFC, but I look at the head coaches on some of these teams in the NFC too that are going to be in the playoffs. And I feel like Pete Carroll is like, he's way up there, right? I mean, like Sean McVay, sure, but like the Rams are not going to maybe be that good this year. You start looking at some of the other teams, Sirianni, unexperienced, although they went to the Super Bowl last year. You look at Kyle Shanahan, he hasn't necessarily had the huge success in the playoffs either. So why not Pete Carroll and the Seattle Seahawks, right? So I don't hate that pick. For my pick, I'll just remind some people of a few things right now. Does the number 52-17 mean anything to you? Does the number 30-13 mean anything to you? Does 2007 T.O. George Wilson 25-24 mean anything to you? For me, this is storybook, long-term, finally getting over on the Dallas Cowboys, and the Bills will circle the wagons this year and beat the Dallas Cowboys in the Super Bowl. Dallas, wildcard team, makes an unexpected run through the NFC playoffs. Mike McCarthy obviously has coached in a lot of playoff games and has coached and won a Super Bowl. I do think Dallas's roster is very, very good, and I think they have the type of roster that can make a deep run in the playoffs. But the Bills finally enact their revenge. Obviously had a little bit of revenge a couple years ago in the Thanksgiving game, but really, really stamp it this year with a win over the Dallas Cowboys in the Super Bowl. Bills over Cowboys.
All right, let's go. I like that a lot. Let's go through some other people's predictions. Jessica Tennis says the Boomer Bowl. They're going to be the Bills versus the 49ers. Pops Mafia says Bills versus Vikings. Let one of them finally win the Super Bowl. What was that movie with John Voight and Gil Bellows? Second String. A little rematch of the Second String Super Bowl there. Steve Noble comes in and says Bills versus Lions. That would be fun. I would like that. Billy Williams says Bills versus 49ers. Go Duke from Pops Mafia because Riley Leonard just ran for a touchdown. My favorite part of college football season is whenever Clemson loses, I can post the image of Dabo Swinney running out of the tunnel with the L flag right behind him. So I'm really hoping I can do that again tonight. So go Duke. It's 13-7 there, just starting the second half of that game. David W comes in with a solid F them boys. So here we go. Very good. We beat them. Walter S says Bills versus Saints. Derek Carr has a Stafford type year, and the Saints without a storybook, but the Saints come up without a storybook ending. Fear Jams says that we have some wild predictions.
I get it, but I'm not gonna pick like Bills like Eagles. It's too easy, right? I gotta pick something different.
Nick Dalloise says grow up, everyone. Like I think he means us by picking the Bills. We're trying to manifest here, Nick. We're trying to manifest. Josh Clark says Buffalo all the way this time. Joe DeRosa says Bills over Cardinals, to be honest. That would be certainly the upset special. CPL Investitrade coming in with Bills versus Seattle. Monkey Business says Bills versus Detroit is the Ralph Wilson Bowl. Renaissance Man, Bills over Giants.
Bills versus Seattle is not that outlandish. I feel like it's not like it's like
I don't think it's that outlandish. Yeah. Hey, you know what? To each their own. Who thought the Cincinnati Bengals were going to make the Super Bowl?
We're trying to have a little bit of a flair here. Okay,
a little flair. Yeah. Everyone can pick Bills Niners. No offense to anyone who picked Bills Niners. All right, Dave, to close out the show this evening, I want to talk just a little bit about a couple of the things going on in the National Football League. We already sort of gave our thoughts a little bit on Thursday Night Football, but what are you looking forward to just three nights from tonight when the Detroit Lions kick it off against the Kansas City Chiefs?
One thing I'm really good. I think this is a good measuring stick for the Lions, and I do think that this is a good measuring stick to really set the bar for this whole AFC versus NFC narrative that has really been the talk of the NFL the last couple years. Like the AFC has really asserted its dominance over the NFC in the past couple years, where for a long time that was the opposite, right? For a long time, the AFC was kind of like the underdog conference. But that has really shifted now with the quarterbacks, the head coaches. You see players like Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers moving over to the AFC. You have presumed sort of stars on the rise, maybe getting knocked down a peg or two in the NFC, like a guy like Kyler Murray comes to mind, right? And then you have some new faces, right, in the NFC, like Baker Mayfield and Derek Carr coming over as maybe mid-tier type quarterbacks in the AFC and now become kind of like maybe like decent options in the NFC. So that's one thing that I'm going to be following throughout the season is this whole AFC versus NFC sort of dynamic. And really, Thursday night's going to be interesting, new announcing team. And then the YouTube TV experience for Sunday Ticket. It's a new era of Sunday Ticket. Yeah. Worked great in the preseason. You can watch, all 4 games at once with the quad view. And so I'm going to be interested to see how YouTube handles Sunday Ticket. I've been a DirecTV guy for years until this year, right? Because of Sunday Ticket. So that's going to be very interesting.
We'll get back to Sunday Ticket in a moment because I definitely want to talk about that. But for the Lions game, I'm really interested in seeing Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell. Like, Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm really looking forward to seeing those two
twist the knife on us with Jack Campbell a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, this year's fantasy sort of sleeper, or everyone's fantasy sleeper, so he's not really a sleeper. Saw him going in second rounds of some leagues. Jahmyr Gibbs.
That's not a sleeper.
Ben Johnson talking about, right, like, oh, we're gonna find some unique ways to use him on offense. Like, no, dude, he's gonna either run the ball or he's gonna catch the ball. Unless Jahmyr Gibbs comes out and plays quarterback and they recreate the Ronnie Brown, Ricky Williams Wildcat, I really don't think that Ben Johnson's going to surprise us with their utilization of Jahmyr Gibbs, but I do think he could be used a lot, and I think he could be really fun. Believe it or not, like an Alabama player, I think he flew under the radar a little bit because of all the attention that Bijan Robinson got last draft cycle. And then Jack Campbell, I mean, he was our favorite all off season. We wanted the Buffalo Bills to draft him. We thought he was a shoo-in for the pick when the Buffalo Bills got there. Our debate all off season was, is it worth it to take a middle linebacker at 25? And then he goes at 17 to the Detroit Lions. He had an awesome preseason. So it'll be really interesting to see him out there for the Detroit Lions as well. But you mentioned Sunday Ticket, and it just finally, so I waited a while. I waited a little bit to purchase it. I purchased it about 2 days ago. So it finally sort of generated on my screen on my YouTube TV, because I'm a YouTube TV subscriber. It
Hmm.
pains me a little bit because I pay $74 a month for YouTube TV. Then in order to ensure that every person in the household, including my wife who wants to watch Sister Wives, and my sister-in-law, who my brother-in-law and sister-in-law share our YouTube TV. She likes to watch things like Hoarders and stuff. So in order to make sure that they can watch their reality TV in the other room, my brother-in-law and myself can watch it on the football on the main TVs. We had to go with the 4K plan, which was another $20 a month. So I'm up to almost $100 a month for my YouTube TV, which is pretty much just cable at this point. And then we have the Sunday ticket price on top of it. So pricey, but I think it's going to be worth it, because it's sort of it, you have all the games listed and you can easily flip between all the games. You can go quad box. I think you can go octo box. People are talking about, and then you have the NFL red zone as well. So I think you're going to have more options with the YouTube TV than you had, I think, with Direct TV. I don't know. I never had Direct TV. I always had the app, and it was very hard to watch two games at once or flip between games. But you, as someone who had you had Direct TV, correct? Was
I
it
had
easy to
direct.
flip between? Was it easy to flip between games with DirecTV? Because it was not with the app on Xbox, which is what I
Yeah, I
used to use.
mean, I just put in the chat. I was a DirecTV guy for 15 years. I mean,
Mhm.
I mean, it was quite easy to use. This is in the
Yeah,
700s. Like, just it was pretty easy to flip between. You had also the multi-view where
yeah.
you had 8 games on the screen at once. So I did find it was pretty easy to use, but I was also paying, for DirecTV, and all my genies that I had and all these, adding HBO.
Mhm.
Like, I was paying 2 to 3 times more for DirecTV with Sunday Ticket than I am for YouTube TV. With Sunday Ticket, paying early for Sunday Ticket, it honestly was like it
Mhm.
was the same price. So, like, it wasn't
Yeah.
any more expensive to buy Sunday Ticket on YouTube TV than it was DirecTV, but it was nice to get rid of all the genies and all that. So I'm looking forward to it. I do think it'll be interesting with streaming if there's a little bit more lag, but then again, on satellite, there's also a little bit of lag as well. So
Yeah.
I don't know how much of a
It
factor that will really be.
My biggest concern, and this is why I'm happy the Buffalo Bills are playing on national TV week 1, is that YouTube better be prepared for the wave that's coming, and have the broadwidth and the broadband, and to handle the capacity that's coming its way, because there's a whole bunch of people in the chat that are thinking like, I'm thinking about switching. I think more people are going to try to access direct or NFL Sunday Ticket, NFL Red Zone through YouTube TV than ever tried to access it through Direct TV and through various different
I
apps.
agree.
I think that they're going to have 30, 40, 50 million more people than maybe Sunday Ticket tried to get. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see if it crashes week 1, because if it crashes week 1 and people are without their football, things will get weird on social media. So it'll be riots in the street type of weird. So
Mm,
it'll be interesting to see if YouTube TV can handle it. But it looks like it's going to be a really quality product. If you don't already have YouTube TV, I suggest it. I
I am.
watched college football all weekend on the on the quad box, and I've had it for 6 years now since I moved out to Arizona. I love it. So huge fan of it. I will always advocate for it. It's gotten progressively more expensive every year, but it's still a really good product. I enjoy the YouTube TV. So I think it's definitely worth your money.
I agree. And like I said, I was on DirecTV for like 15 years. Just finally made the switch this year,
Mhm.
mainly because of Sunday Ticket.
Yeah.
And my biggest fear was not having certain channels or not being able to watch anything I needed to watch. But I have not missed anything that I've wanted to watch. Unlimited DVR has all the channels I need, and yeah, I've had no complaints and glad to be paying a lot less. So I would recommend it as well.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is gonna about do it for us this evening. Our weekly challenge again for you when this show is over. If you want to help us out, go into the comment section of this YouTube video and comment with your prediction for the Buffalo Bills 2023 regular season. Make a postseason prediction. Let us know. Call your shot for the 2023 Buffalo Bills. It helps us with the algorithm. It helps gets us in front of more eyeballs. So if you can support us that way, that and smashing that like button, we would really appreciate it. And the reason why this evening we didn't spend any time talking about Bills Jets, really, is because number one, you're going to hear a lot about it this week from the various different Cover One channels. You already, I think, started hearing about it tonight from the Cover One Roundup guys. We had to save that content because we had our pregame show, which comes back starting next Monday. So we will be live next Monday, 7 p.m., an hour before kickoff of Bills Jets. And we will have our first of 17 pregame shows this season. We will be live before the Bills game every week. And then we'll be live every Monday nights to do our post-game show. Now there is, Greg and Aaron are going to come on after Bills Jets. It's not going to be us. So it'll be interesting to see where we end up doing our post-game show next week, but it'll be somewhere on the Cover One schedule. But typically we'll have the pregame shows on Sundays, and then we'll have our wrap-up shows on Mondays. So that's what you have to look forward to starting next week. 2 episodes a week of the Air Raid Hour. Dave, any final thoughts before we head out of here?
So nice to be getting into regular season form right about now. I'm looking forward to it, man. Next Monday's pregame is going to be fire. We do have to figure out what we're going to do for the, of course, schedule is interesting. Week 1, we'll just have to figure out what we're going to do. But no, at a minimum, we'll be doing the pregame on Monday at 7 o'clock. So we'll see you there.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comments section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!